We have Timothy Pepper here today. Mr. Pepper is a trial lawyer. He primarily represents businesses and their leaders. He is an OSBA certified specialist in labor and employment law. He's a graduate of Leadership at Dayton, and he served on active duty in the U.S. Navy from 1987 to 1991. Mr. Pepper is going to continue our discussion on sunshine laws and primarily the First Amendment compliance in the era of social media. Some of the stuff we kind of hinted on earlier, he's going to give you a little more detailed discussion about that. So let's all welcome Mr. Pepper.
Anyway, again, I'm Tim Pepper. Really glad to be here. I thought Carl's presentation was great on the media aspect of all this. A lot of the same things he was telling you for council meetings also applies to courtroom work as well, so I see that in my work. One of the things I did early in my career was I had someone videotape me in the courtroom so I could, suck it up and pour a drink and watch myself actually work on camera, and it was horrible. It was just terrible, terrible, terrible. So I would recommend you do that because it's not going to be any fun, but you'll learn a lot about how you look to others if you watch yourself work on camera. And also, by the way, I'm the poster child today of how not to dress if you're going to be on camera. I've got the black suit, the white shirt, and the red tie, which you can't get any worse than this for a guy. In any event, I'm going to move a little bit quickly because I think I can get us back on track, or at least mostly back on track. I was down for 45 minutes. I can do this in 20 or so. So let's just kind of move right along. Because it's a small group, feel free to ask any questions as we go. In larger groups, that gets difficult. In small groups, that works really well. If it's on your mind, it's on someone else's mind as well. And having a back and forth dialogue is always more fun than just having someone talk at you for however long I stand up here. So, I know you've all heard earlier today about public records laws, Open Meetings Act, compliance issues, so I'm not going to rehash the basics. What I'm going to talk about today briefly is how social media can impact your organization's compliance with those laws. The laws themselves haven't changed in quite a while. These are fairly well settled areas of the law. The First Amendment, which we'll talk about briefly, has been around for hundreds of years. But how you comply with these laws is a moving target when the way in which you meet with others and the way in which you interact with your constituents is a moving target. So social media can create some complexity, and we're going to talk about some of this today. This, by the way, is not a downer on social media. I'm not here to discourage anyone from being on social media. I'm not here to say you shouldn't be on social media. I think it's a great thing. It enables communication with your constituents in a way that used to be pretty hard to do. Whether you are on individually or whether your political subdivision that you're with is on, it's good and it's fine. And it's nothing to be afraid of. So don't take this as a don't do it session. This is just a let's be smart about it session. All right, so Ohio has sunshine laws, as you've heard. Ohio's laws are among the strongest in the country when it comes to Open Meetings Act compliance and Public Records Act compliance. Our laws are much stronger than the federal laws that govern the federal agency access. I believe that's a good thing, but we need to make sure we're meeting our obligations here. So let's talk first about the Open Meetings Act. The basics of this are fairly simple, as you've heard. A meeting of a public body. A public body would be a deliberative body like a city council or a board of township trustees or a school board or things like that. Meetings of public bodies have to be open to the public to observe. The meeting must be announced ahead of time. So impromptu pop-up meetings are not going to qualify under the Act because you have to announce ahead of time when and where it's going to occur. And a violation can be fairly devastating because if a meeting occurs and a vote is taken in the meeting, that vote can be invalidated if that meeting was not properly noticed and if the Open Meetings Act wasn't complied with. Meaning your public body can undertake a very important vote on something and then find out after maybe a few months of litigation, no, doesn't count. And you can imagine the havoc that can cause. And so this is an important issue. It's not hard to comply, but boy, you got to make sure you do comply. All right, what social media usage can qualify as a meeting? In the old days, this was a simple thing to do when meetings were just physical meetings in person. Those don't happen just spontaneously, and so you would know you're going to do it, and you would make the announcement and so on, and you would have the right public to attend and observe, and it was easy. But in social media, well, electronic communication in general may be a little more difficult. Let's talk about email for a second, because email kind of lays the foundation for a lot of what's going to come. The Ohio Supreme Court has held that a meeting, quote unquote, can occur if public officials who are on this public body use email to communicate with each other in such a way that they're basically deliberating and deciding something between them by using email instead of doing it in person. So if we use a board of township trustees, that's the easy example because there's only 3 of them. One trustee emails another one, says, hey, what do you think about this? We got a vote coming up Thursday night. Trustee replies back, well, I'm going to go this way on it. Here's my thought. First guy replies back, yeah, okay, I think I agree. We're good to go. You just had a majority of your board of township trustees deliberate something. Really good argument. You just violated the Open Meetings Act because that was not a pre-announced meeting and the public could not attend. Right? The fact that the public can read the emails later on, if they're produced, doesn't save it. The public has to be able to attend the meeting as it's occurring, right? So that's Ohio Supreme Court decision saying that scenario I just gave you is a meeting of the public body. Well, what happens on social media? Social media is really analogous to email. You can have one public official, let's use our Board of Township Trustees again. One trustee goes on Facebook and says, vote coming up Thursday night, it's on a new road project, whatever it is, I'm voting no. Fiscal responsibility, here's why. Lays out an argument. Another township trustee chimes in on that conversation by posting something in reply to that post on social media. That is electronic communication back and forth between, at this point, a majority of that public body. Really good argument. That also, the courts are going to find that also violates the Open Meetings Act. You've got public officials deliberating on something, and it's not in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Therefore, the subsequent vote on that on Thursday night on that road project could well be invalidated. The bigger your body, the harder this gets. Yes?
Does it take the reply back to constitute a violation?
So the question was, does it take the reply back to constitute a violation? I think it does, because otherwise it's just one guy shouting into a void, right? And that's not a meeting. The reply back would be. But take it one step further. What if instead of a reply back, another township trustee just likes it? Your guess is as good as mine. My guess, though, is they've communicated. One person laid out a thought, a position on an issue that's going to come before a vote. The other person communicated back. Now on Facebook, I'm told, I don't do Facebook much, but I'm told you can do more than just like. You can make an angry face, or you can do something like that. So now there's even more nuanced communication than just a thumbs up on something. So that hasn't come to the courts yet. This is all brand new stuff, right? Well, email is not brand new, but the social media stuff on Open Meetings Act in the courts is new. I would not want to be the trustees that had a major vote on a bond issue or something invalidated because of a stupid Facebook comment. So we'll get to it in a minute on how we're going to keep that from happening. But just be aware that could happen. What about interactions between public officials on social media and constituents? Would that be an Open Meetings Act issue? I don't think so, because the Open Meetings Act is regarding meetings between members of a public body, and a member communicating with her constituents is not the same thing as a meeting of the body. Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Now, there's a Public Records Act issue we'll get to in a minute, but when it comes to the Open Meetings Act, I wouldn't worry about that. Does the fact that all this is playing out on social media help our situation because social media is public? No, it doesn't help because, one, it's not always public. You can control your settings on your Facebook page to where these conversations can occur between friends or whatnot and not be seen by the public. But second, I think most importantly, Open Meetings Act requires notice of meetings. It requires the public be told there's going to be a council meeting Thursday at 7. If it's just a random interaction on Facebook or something or on Twitter, probably not pre-announced. And so you've probably right off the bat not complied with the Open Meetings Act. All right. So what can you do to minimize this problem, potential problem? You as elected officials are in the best position to solve this problem. Don't use social media to comment on things that are going to come before you for a vote. I think it's as simple as that when it comes to risk management. If there's something that you know is going to come to you for you for a vote, then just don't discuss it on social media. I think it's great to go on social media, congratulate the roads department for getting the snow off so quickly. I think it's great to congratulate someone who gets an award. I think it's great to, you can comment on things that aren't going to come to you for you for a vote. Comment on other issues, that's fine. But if it's going to come to you for a vote, or if you think it even might come to you for a vote, I would stay off social media on that issue. Right? So the higher the number, the less likely it is you're going to get a majority. And that's the threshold for a public meeting, is the majority of the members. So you would have to have 3 of your 5 engage in communication on social media to have that problem. If you go out there and share your view on something that's going to come up to you for a vote, you're sort of hoping that there aren't 2 more of your colleagues who are going to chime in. If you're confident that the public is going to respond and not your fellow board members, then you're fine. Yeah. I guess one thing to do is don't have any of your fellow colleagues as your friends on, or basically block them on social media so they can't comment on. For other reasons, that's already done. So that's one way to solve it, I guess, is control your settings so that no one else is on the public body with you can comment on your posts or respond or whatnot. That's up to you if you want to do that. But that's the safest way to comply with this, is just don't take things that are going to come to a vote on social media. All right. Any questions on that? Not rocket science, but something just to kind of keep your eye on. If you're on one of these school boards that's got 7 members, I don't think I'd worry too much about it, but you never know. Yeah, I think the statute is that's the majority of the members. Now, you can, going back to that email case I was talking about, there have been situations where public officials have tried to game the system by having multiple conversations between 2 people. So I talked to you about it, and then you talk to him, and then you talk to her, and then we kind of figure out, she comes back to me, and we've done some public business without there ever being a majority of us in the same conversation. So obviously that's just gaming the system.
Maybe she'll come back to bite me.
Well, yeah, it definitely doesn't come back to bite you if you do that. If it becomes known it happened, yeah. Let's go on to public records. Again, you've heard the basics about this, and the basics are fairly simple. Public record is any document, and that includes electronically stored information. Any document that serves to document the functions of the public office, to capture all that down into one little sentence. And again, before social media came along, this was pretty easy. Everyone understood that if an email would qualify on a piece of paper, then it qualifies if it's an email. The fact that it's electronic makes no difference. That's easily understood and so on. With social media, though, we're in a little more complexity. But again, I think the email analogy will help us get through this. So, revised code was amended a while back in response to email concerns to define a quote-unquote electronic record means a record created, generated, sent, communicated, received, or stored by electronic means. And this definition is in the context of what is a public record, what includes electronic records that meet this definition. All right? This was written back in the email era, when you would do things with emails like create them and generate them and send them and communicate them and receive them, and it was easily understood what was going on. Right? Well, that word receive is going to cause us some issues here, because in social media, you can receive things from the public all the time on your social media account, and these are electronic records that you are receiving. So we'll get there in a minute. All right, so social media usage qualifies. as public records, the fact that it's on social media doesn't actually make a difference at all. If it was public record on a piece of paper, if it was public record when you got it in the mail in writing, then it's public record even if it happens in a Facebook comment, even if it's a reply to a tweet or something like that. So let's distinguish for a minute between social media accounts that are owned and maintained by the political subdivision versus your own personal social media accounts, because there is a difference. If your political subdivision is on social media, and I'm guessing almost all of them are, you've got a Twitter or a Facebook or something, almost anything that is posted on there is pretty much by definition going to be a public record. Your city has a Twitter account and you tweet something about something that pertains to the city, and the purpose of that is, like all of social media, is to communicate to the world at large, here's what we think about this topic at this day and time. Public record, okay? So if that's the account we're talking about, clearly that's public record. What about responses to social media posts? If there's a response to a tweet or a response to a Facebook post, again, if the response in any way, shape, or form pertains to what the communication was, if it pertains to the business of the political subdivision, it's going to be a public record. The fact that it's just a totally unsolicited response that some Yahoo out there on Facebook posted in response to what you put out there, and it's super informal and it's meaningless, it just doesn't matter. It is public record, all right? So if it's the subdivision's own account, you need to just assume that whatever goes on there is public record. We're going to talk in a minute about deleting things off of your social media accounts. Even if you delete them off for other purposes, they are still public records just by virtue of the fact that they appeared on your account and you had custody of them and then made a decision, okay? So let's stop there for a second. How in the world are you going to comply with this? How are you going to preserve and maintain these public records when it's just these ephemeral little comments and tweets and all this jazz that goes on, and it can be overwhelmingly voluminous sometimes? How do you maintain these records in a way that complies with the Public Records Act? Well, the Act requires each political subdivision to have a schedule, right? A plan, basically, for how you're going to categorize and maintain public records. Your social media needs to be on your schedule. So your schedule needs to say, here's what we're going to do with our Facebook account or our Twitter account or whatnot. And then you just have to make sure that you actually do archive all of the activity on that account. One way to do that is just have a policy that you're never, ever going to delete anything. You could do that. You may not want to do that because you're going to have people posting pretty awful stuff on there sometimes, but that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to have some poor sap on staff whose job it is to go through and save all this stuff every day, and no one wants to spend their time doing that. It's a waste of money. Or there are web-based services out there that for a relatively modest fee will just automatically archive all activity on a social media account that you point it to. And a lot of my corporate clients use this on their corporate social media accounts just so they have a record of whatever it is that went on. No reason why you can't do that too. And this is something where you pay a monthly subscription fee and you tell them, we want you to archive this Twitter account, and anything that ever shows up, sucked into electronic archive automatically. And if you ever have to go back and find it, they've got it, there it is, it's easy to access, you can search it by keyword, it's pretty simple, right? I personally would recommend you consider that over some other method that's almost guaranteed to miss some things here and there or consume a lot of your staff time. Right? So that's the subdivision's own social media account. What about yours? Right? Well, your own personal Facebook, let's just stick with that for a minute. Because it's your own personal account, not everything that happens there is going to be a public record. Public records are things that document the functioning of the political subdivision. It's not your pictures of your kid's birthday party. It's not all the other stuff that we run across on Facebook. But if you do use Facebook to communicate with your constituents, which a lot of you probably will, and nothing wrong with that, it's a great way of communicating in this day and age, just be advised that if those communications with your constituents would be public records if they were done through the mail on paper, then they're public records if they're done over Facebook via comments on posts. So that being said, I think you ought to talk to your political subdivision about what the plan is for archiving those communications. Not that I'm ever going to advise you not to fully comply with the law, okay? But as a practical matter, there are gray areas here. And so if it's literally just what you said, you complain about the traffic in front of the school and someone else says, well, we should put a light up there or something, I wouldn't lose a whole lot of sleep over that, right? If it turns into a consistent kind of thing, or if you reply back and say, well, actually, we're in the next budget, we're going to, okay, well, now you're talking about things that are more closely, clearly public records, right? There is a gray area. Again, these laws were written in an era when you didn't have instantaneous mass communication in writing all the time like you do now. So you got to kind of use your judgment. If it gets to a point where you're not sure, talk to your staff and see what their thoughts are on it. Yeah. Okay. So how do you retain records? Talked about that. You want to archive it, probably using a service. How do you respond to a request for public records? Well, again, and at this point you probably preview what I'm going to say. If it would be a request received on a piece of paper in the mail, then it's a request if you get it via social media. And so if someone on your Facebook in response to a comment says, oh yeah, show that to me, I want to see that. Okay, that's probably a request for public record, all right? So be advised that if something does look like a request on social media, don't think it's not just because it wasn't in some more formal manner of communication. When it comes to compliance, suppose you don't ever delete anything off your social media account. Your policy is we delete nothing. It's all there for all time. If you get a request for public records related to social media, can you just point the requester to your account? Can you just say to the requester, it's there for yourself, go look at it, here's our Twitter handle, here's our Facebook page, you can see it for yourself. Is that a proper compliance with a request for public records? Probably not. And the reason why is that it doesn't really differentiate where in there the person can go to look for their content. It's kind of like saying, someone makes a request, I want to see the budget for 2012 or something, and your response is, well, it's in the warehouse. So just go down the street and look in the warehouse till you find it. Now, you got to be a little more specific in directing someone to where they can find the information they're seeking. Also, I don't care what your policy is, I can almost guarantee you someone's going to delete stuff off of your social media page just because there's going to be crazy, wacky stuff posted on there by some of your constituents or others. And third, people who are not under the control of the subdivision can post on social media. That post becomes a public record and then take it off themselves. You can delete comments and things that you make on someone else's Facebook page. Well, once that comment's made, it's a public record. So later on, pointing someone to the page and saying, go look for it there, it may not be there. Right? So that's why you want to use an archiving service, and that's why you want to use the archive service to respond to records requests and not just point them to Facebook itself. All right. The last sort of topic for my little presentation is the First Amendment. We've talked a lot about deleting things off of social media. Right? Well, let's think back to get outside of social media and get back into the real world. The First Amendment says that if the government provides a public forum for public communication about a topic of public concern, the government can't censor the content of that communication. Right? If you're at a city council meeting and someone wants to stand up and oppose, and it's the meeting is thrown open for public comment. So you got the mic there on the stand, and people come up and they want to stay there 3 minutes or whatever they get. You can't have a rule that says only comments in favor will be taken, thank you, and comments opposed can be heard out in the street. No, right? You can't have a rule that says that only a certain viewpoint can be expressed on the street corner, but other viewpoints are censored. It's basic America, we all get this. Well, your social media page, where you're posting comments about matters of public concern, the budget, the roads, whatever, the new school buildings under consideration, whatever you got going on where you're from, that is a public forum created by the political subdivision, if it's the city's own Facebook page, for example, for the purpose of people communicating, including citizens, about matters of public concern. The First Amendment actually applies to your school district's social media accounts. Mind blown, but true. So, that being said, I've probably said 6 times in the last 20 minutes, you're going to go in and delete stuff off of there. Well, how do you do that? Is that not censorship of things, of speech that you don't want to hear? The answer is, and again, we're going back to rules that are 200 years old, even the government can, in a public forum, can censor speech if the government imposes reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. This is why at the city council meeting, the public is allowed to speak for 3 minutes but not 10, because the council can impose a reasonable restriction on the amount of speech it's going to hear from any one given person. That's okay. That's not a content-based restriction. That's a reasonable restriction in order to keep things going. Likewise, someone can't stand up at the city council meeting within their allotted 3 minutes and start spewing profanities. That'll get shut down by the deputy there in the room, because you can have a rule that says that the public speech in this forum has to be, decent, and it cannot be indecent or profane. So what you need to do is develop a policy that applies the same rules to your social media account. You can have rules that say that on your social media account, if someone from the public posts something that's profane, obscene, gone. If the local realtor gets on there and keeps on posting her ads for services on the city's Facebook page, you can censor those too. If someone couldn't stand up at a city council meeting and say it, they can't go on your social media and say it there too. All right? So you can, within rules, censor social media posts by others. What you need to do, and this is the same thing that's going to enable you to comply with every other issue I've discussed today, is you need to have a policy. You need to have a policy about how your political subdivision is going to use social media in general. And some of the things you want to address on your policy, you want to have a policy that says that members of your public bodies, which you, will not use their personal, private social media to address matters of public concern. That is often in these policies because that helps to prevent the Open Meetings Act issues I talked about at the beginning. The policy, by the way, can't prevent you. You're elected officials, not your staff. And so the policy cannot prevent you from doing something like that, but the policy should discourage elected officials from commenting on social media on matters that's going to come before a vote. Your policy should say that your social media content is going to be scheduled and archived in compliance with the Public Records Act. Policy should say that certain kinds of speech, certain kinds of content will be censored off of, removed from, I wouldn't use the word censor in your policy because you'll get hate mail, will be removed from your social media accounts. Things that are obscene, things that advocate illegal conduct. Someone can't get on there and advocate, let's all go throw rocks through the city council windows or anything like that. Things that are just wholly off topic. People can't get on there and advertise their used car lot down the street and whatnot. You can have reasonable rules, spell them out in your policy, and then the policy should say that you're going to have one person on your staff, maybe 2 at the most if you're a big subdivision, who's responsible for monitoring social media and enforcing the rules. You don't want to have the password information for your social media accounts spread out among 10 different staff members, because you can imagine what will happen if you do that. And you don't want to have the responsibility to make these decisions on what's in or out when it comes to censorship diffused either, because that's going to lead to bad decision making. You want to have 1 or 2 people who are trained, who are trusted, who know what they're doing. They're responsible for monitoring these accounts, or at least reacting if someone brings to them a concern about something that's been posted on an account. Right? So none of this should scare you away from social media, but it should hopefully be a little bit of an eye-opener that there can be complexities here. I personally would, one of the things that Carl said earlier in his presentation was, if you wouldn't say it to your mother, don't say it to the paper. Grandmother, right? I think that level of caution is also pretty advisable when it comes to social media. Be super careful about what you say and do on social media. Someone's watching, I guarantee it. And even if what you're saying is decent and appropriate, if it pertains to a matter that you're going to vote on at a later date, or you might vote on a later date, I would just tend to shy away from that and avoid a lot of problems that way. And it's shocking to me. I'm going to show my age here, but I started doing this before Facebook existed, and when I first started practicing, it was when email was relatively new in the public sector. A lot of our clients were not big users of email for just mundane, ordinary stuff, and it was shocking how many people would just say really idiotic things in an email, thinking that somehow or another, because it was electronic and it wasn't printed out, it wasn't quite as real. If it's on your computer, or heaven forbid, if it traveled over someone else's computer, like social media or email, it is more durable than anything you're ever going to print on paper. It exists. It exists somewhere. I can always go find it. I can subpoena your cell phone company. I can subpoena your internet service provider. It's always there. And so this is a detour, but oh my gosh, just be super careful and advise your people, since you're in leadership positions, be super careful. Don't do anything electronically that you wouldn't want splashed above the fold in the Dayton Daily News, because it exists. Sorry?
Even if you scrub it, what was
BleachBit, is that what you said?
Yeah.
All right. So BleachBit is a piece of software you can buy that purportedly will scrub your hard drive on your computer so that whatever's on there cannot be recovered. All right. There's a debate as to whether it actually works or not, because like all technology, it's moving pretty quickly. So I do trial work for a living. A and B, right? A over here is there's a bad email that I'm going to use against my opponent. That's great. I like that. You know what's better? What's better, B. B is BleachBit. Because then I get to make up what's in that email. Because now there's a cover-up. And now the cover-up's always worse than the crime. So instead of the email saying whatever, I can just make up whatever I want on my email. And I can argue pretty effectively, well, it must have said that. They're so worried they broke the law to scrub it. So BleachBit is a horrible idea. The cover-up is always worse than the crime. And by the way, BleachBit's only ever going to work on your computer. It's not going to work on the 5 other computers that have a copy of what we're talking about. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So that I understand what you said, a lot of our council members have Facebook pages to keep their constituents advised.
Mm-hmm.
If one of those council members is trying to rally support for an issue that's coming up and to get people to come into council meeting and speak up, and they post on there, Thursday we're going to have this meeting on this subject, what do you think of it? Would you come to the meeting now? If people start responding, that's okay, but if she responds back to them, it's not okay.
Well, if it's just constituents who are responding back, yeah, I'm all for it, or no, I'm against it, that's not a meeting of the public body, because that's just one elected official talking to her constituents.
Or
So
maybe one or two other, they might come in and hit a like or something.
my view is, if you get to a majority of your officials in that public body who like or respond to that, I think you're running a risk that you're now communicating sort of contemporaneously in real time about an issue that's going to come before a vote in a way that doesn't comply with the Open Meetings Act, right? So I think if you've got other elected officials on that same body who are weighing in, that's no different than if they were emailing each other, weighing in, and that's been decided. That can be an open meeting. If it's just constituents, no problem at all. Now, I would want to preserve those communications because those are probably public records, right? But that wouldn't be an Open Meetings Act issue. If few of you try this out and you find that whatever you do on social media consistently gets likes or dislikes by other people on your same elected body, maybe that's a good indication that you dial it back. You can try it and see. If you do a few of them and none of your other colleagues ever like or dislike or reply or whatnot, then maybe you're in the clear. But just understand there is a risk there of something happening. Any more questions before I wrap up? Yes, ma'am.
What if you comment on somebody else's posts? Do you need to report that for public record?
Yeah. So the question is, someone else who's not a public official, who's not your city or township or whatnot, posts something on a matter of public concern, so it's within the scope of your second part-time job as elected official, and then you respond back. Right? You now have a communication back and forth with a constituent on a matter of public concern. Pretty good argument, that's a public record. So this is one of those ones where technically, theoretically, yeah, right? Now, again, I think you kind of use judgment a little bit. If it's not something that you do all the time, it's not this big ongoing dialogue, if it's nothing more than just, amen or something, just a quick little response, I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it, right? But if it's something you do a lot, if it's a way that you communicate with your constituents a lot, and so you're doing it quite a bit, then yeah, you may want to talk to your staff about what to do about that, because again, if a constituent wrote you a letter in the mail and you wrote them back, this is really not that much different, is it? All right, thank you much.